the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
I think if you're just strictly in the business of tipping your cap to the seniors and then winning basketball games, that's probably the best way to do it. I think that's the way you kind of avoid falling into those senior day traps.
That's fair. Well, you mentioned the Lady Vols. It did not end well in Greenville, where you just got back from here, Ryan, Sylvia. I mean, they made it somewhat interesting down the stretch. They dug another big hole against Vanderbilt on this Thursday afternoon, sir. But what did you make of Tennessee going down early here in the SEC tournament?
Yeah, I mean, they look like a different team than we've seen for most of the year. They are falling into some of the same old traps. The poor starts to games are so frustrating to watch because it feels like clockwork almost. Like, yeah, they're going to fall into a 10-point deficit in the first quarter. They're going to fight out of it. And then at halftime or the third quarter, they're going to tie it up. And it's a whole new ball game from there, where if they just took care of business out the jump, then maybe they don't have to be tied up in the third quarter. And they're the one with the 10-point lead that they're trying to defend it. And you hear some players in the locker room stuff talk about that, but it's just, they look a little gassed. The biggest, most interesting thing that Kim Caldwell said in the post-game press conference, I'll find the exact quote because I don't want to misquote her with this. She said it was about kind of how they've handled load management. God, let me see. It's right here. She said, I think we haven't really handled our load the way we should have in hindsight. I think we're tired and need a rest, get healthy, just get a reset. So I think that's interesting. Like it's like pretty, it's cool to see a coach admit that maybe they regret a little bit how they've handled things because they look a step behind at times. You saw Vanderbilt run out against the press and beat it by just running past people a few times. And then you're out of position. You're either fouling from behind or you have those open looks under the basket. So is it going to be a learning curve for Kim in the future years? Is she going to change some things up to try to keep some legs under her players? They have some time off, which I think is really nice for them and surely something that Kim's excited about. As we mentioned earlier, there is that gap between the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament for women's basketball. So I think that's good, but it's been ugly recently. It doesn't feel like the same team that beat UConn, and that was just like a month ago. So it's just been a weird thing to watch as it feels like, I mean, Kim's agreed, someone asked her, like, does this feel like a regression? And she was like, it feels like it's the team from closer to the beginning of the year that needed to learn some lessons. And all of a sudden it's like, I mean, you got one more guaranteed game and it's going to probably be a 5 seed against a 12 seed. Like that can be tough. That can be tricky. You've seen in the men's tournament all the time where teams get caught in that matchup and they've got to figure it out. They've got a week to do it, but something's got to change with them. Whether it's just getting their legs on them, getting refreshed or whatever it is, I mean, they got to figure it out.
It is interesting though, Ryan, and because like Kim Caldwell talked about it today in terms of like this team's just tired, right? And I kind of wonder because I think there are some fans who kind of raise an eyebrow at that of like, okay, well, is that the scheme? Like, is that bodies just that you have right now? Is it just you're not as talented as you need to be, so you're having to go a little bit harder? Like, I don't have the answer to that, but I do think it's interesting that this style, which is going, like, before she got here, that was the question, is like, is this sustainable? Like, are you going to be able to press like this, play this hard-nosed defense, shoot a bunch of threes, still have your legs? Because, I mean, that's part of the worry of the high volume of threes when you're playing such hard, intense defense all the time, is that you get tired legs in the second half. You get tired legs, and it's harder over the course of the season to withstand this. I mean, Barnes is running the Tom Thibodeau New York Knicks stuff right now. Like, he is college basketball Tom Thibodeau, and there's not anybody any closer. Like, he's okay going 7. Like, I think, enjoys more of 7 to 8 guys he really trusts and can play a bunch of minutes. Like, I don't think he's ever once hesitated about playing Zakai Ziegler 38 minutes a night. But I do wonder on when you look at with the Lady Vols, like, I don't know, because like the early part of the year, people were like, whoa, we're subbing so much. It's like hockey shifts over here. And people were like, is this going to continue? Or are you going to be able to get away with this many just subs in and out? And obviously that kind of normalized and changed as the year went on. I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing because I think it's more extreme in Kim's case with her style than Barnes. But I do wonder, just kind of like with this style, because it's a long season and your ultimate goal is still to win it all one day at Tennessee. What do you make of the style and just the tired aspect? Do you think it's just, hey, just the way things have gone this year? It's just the team, the schedule, and this is not really scheme related? Or do you think there might be something to the scheme? So when she's saying that the team is tired, that it's like, well, then maybe you need to make some changes for next year to ensure that they're not this gassed here in early part of March, the most important part of the year, because they have more bodies than Barnes has right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it's probably the scheme. I mean, you have to assume that wears down on you, and it's probably easier to get away with that at the Division II or the Marshall level of basketball. Like that's probably an easier gauntlet to run through. And I think Kim would admit that like you hear about how physical the SEC is, you hear about how tough it is to play, but you don't really know until you've done it, until you've lived out that schedule. And she's done that now, and that's what year one's for. And you see that across all sports, and you see the year one. That's why things go in the right direction when they do, is because they take notes and they learn and they grow from it. So I think it's reasonable to think that not that she'll abandon the press or her scheme or her system or anything like that. Like that'll still be what they do, but maybe there's little tinkers here and there and little things that she hey, last year we subbed this amount, maybe it needs to be more, maybe it needs to be less, or whatever it is that she feels like puts her team in a spot where they're prepared for this time of year. But you also have to look at the other side of things. Like, sure, the Lady Vols are going to be gassed, and you look at, let's say the NCAA tournament, they have this break, so you would think that they'll be pretty good to go. Like the wind will be back in their sails. You play that first game, 2 days later, you play that second game. Who is that going to affect more is my question. Are the Lady Vols going to be more affected because they had to play 2 games in 3 days where they ran that system? Or is the team that played the game 2 days before that they're playing now that they have to play that system that they're not prepared for, that they haven't practiced all year, is it going to get their opponent? I'm curious to see like how, I guess, where's the conditioning at for both sides? Because the Lady Vols are used to this. They do it every day. And that has its detriments and its positives. Whatever team they're playing probably isn't nearly as conditioned as they are. So could we get to a place in March Madness NCAA tournament where that second game of those weekends, that's where they see a lot of success, and that's where they could create that upset where they're probably going to have to be on the road as a 5-4 seed, and in true road game, maybe they catch a team like Duke or North Carolina, because they're still kind of reeling after a game 2 days ago, and the Lady Vols are used to that type of work.
Which way do you think it ultimately goes, Ryan? Like, what's your gut in next year?
This year, the way they're playing, it feels like they're probably a second round team. Like, I think if they can truly return to where they're playing well, and then they're plenty capable of catching a 4 seed and then getting to a Sweet 16. Then you're playing a 1 seed, and that's really tough, and we'll see what happens there. But like, they went on the road and they played Texas really well, and that was without Kim. And they've played South Carolina really well. They beat UConn. They played LSU. So like, they've proven they can hang in these games. So I'm not saying that a farther run isn't possible, but right now it feels like a round of 32 team, with a possibility of upsetting that on the road aspect too. Makes it much tougher than the men's, of course. But in turn, I don't know. It's tough to say, because I think you've seen both sides of it. Like, you saw the side of it against an A&M team that isn't good and they're missing their best player. Like, you beat a SEC team by 40 in the SEC tournament. I think part of that is A&M is getting off a really long emotional season that didn't go the way they expected it to, and they just suffocated. And the Lady Vols just did whatever they wanted, partially due to that scheme. I think you saw against Vanderbilt, a Vandy team that had that extra day of rest, against the Tennessee team that played the day before, and Tennessee just wasn't able to kind of have enough in their tank to get to the finish line. So I think we've already seen in the last couple of days both sides of it. So it's tough to say like this is how it plays out. But this year, I mean, it feels like this year more than any would be the year that maybe things don't go their way, just because of, like we talked about, you learn all those lessons in year one. Maybe that's part of the lessons that Tennessee and Kim Caldwell and her staff have to learn.
Yeah, it's just funny. Like, it all matters, and it's just recency. It's the way our brains work. Is like that down the stretch. This is what you remember, and this is what's frustrating. But it's like, remember this team, like you said. I mean, they go in, they close in Brooklyn, and
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.